Bonjour tout le monde. On vient de conclure 2 journées importantes de rencontres, de réunions ici au Pérou pour la rencontre de l'APEC. 2 days of constructive, substantial, frank meetings where we've managed to continue to advance the kinds of things that matter to Canadians. We've been talking about trade that benefits our small businesses, our middle class, our workers. We've been talking about working to resolve some of the uncertainties around the international rules-based order and the need to continue to step up to defend multilateral institutions and our capacity both to grow the economy and create prosperity, but deliver for our citizens at times of challenges around affordability. 2 great examples of that are, one, the Indonesian free trade agreement that we announced yesterday. Indonesia is the 4th largest country in the world, 4th most populous country in the world, which means that as a significant partner, which we've already seen trade increase as we've engaged with them over the past years, we're going to be able to significantly grow that. Mary, notre ministre du Commerce international, va leader un groupe d'entreprises en Indonésie dans les mois à venir pour démontrer comment on peut créer des opportunités de la prospérité pour la classe moyenne, pour les travailleurs, pour les entreprises au Canada. On a aussi beaucoup parlé de l'intelligence artificielle comme industrie transformatrice dans le monde, comme innovation transformatrice, mais aussi les besoins en termes d'énergie. Le Canada est en train de développer des solutions nucléaires. On en a vendu déjà une couple en Roumanie. Et il y a beaucoup d'intérêt de nos partenaires APEC pour pouvoir répondre aux besoins en énergie auxquels le monde va faire face dans les années à venir. Not just talking about trade with the Indonesian free trade deal, which is a significant move forward, but also talking a lot about AI and Canada's leadership on that and other advanced technologies, but also the need to power the innovation of the future, which is going to require a lot more investments in power generation because of environmental challenges. We want that to be renewable or at least low emitting, and that's where Canada's nuclear industry that has recently sold 2 full-scale reactors to Romania and is working on agreements around the world is stepping up to meet the needs of a energy-intense transformation towards more digital and more AI economies. These are things that Canada has had robust conversations on over the past number of days, and we look forward to continuing them with many more partners at the G20 over the coming days.
Thank you, Prime Minister. We'll now go over questions for reporter David Aiken.
David Aiken, Global News. Good afternoon, Prime Minister. Okay, let's talk about Trump for a bit. And I wonder if that's what leaders were saying to you as you met them at dinner in the hallways and people just had some conversations. Just curious about the tone. Are people anxious, celebratory? Give us your sense of where the conversation sort of roughly ran when you talked to leaders.
It was obviously a conversation that came up a fair bit. People know that Canada managed to steer through the first Trump presidency with significant success in creating jobs and opportunity for Canadians and American workers, and they wanted to know what kinds of things they need to be focused on. And I pointed out that emphasizing the win-wins, understanding that there are going to be challenging moments ahead, that Donald Trump will very much be focused on what's good for the United States, but because trade can and should fundamentally be win-win, that there are ways to work in serious but frank and open engagements that deliver opportunities for people. So a lot of people talking about it, but a sense of, okay, let's do this. Let's make sure we're standing up for our citizens and creating growth for everyone, because that's a conversation we have anyway.
En français, sur le gagnant-gagnant.
Je pense qu'il y a beaucoup de conversations sur les résultats électoraux américains où les gens sont en train de me demander, de se demander les uns les autres quelle sera la meilleure façon de défendre les intérêts de leurs citoyens. J'ai partagé que la première fois avec Trump, on a pu démontrer un leadership pour protéger les emplois et créer des emplois pour la classe moyenne au Canada, tout en cherchant des situations gagnant-gagnant. avec les États-Unis et que ça prenait une approche sérieuse et robuste, mais que c'était très possible de créer des opportunités, surtout que parce que les échanges internationaux peuvent et doivent être gagnant-gagnant, on peut créer des solutions avec l'administration de M. Trump.
I wanted to ask as well about Premiers Ford and Smith are both in agreement that Mexico ought to be out of any North American trade deal unless they tariff Chinese EVs. I wondered your thoughts on that and whether you had the chance to talk to President Sheinbaum about that.
During the renegotiation of NAFTA last time around, Mexico was a solid partner in advancing the priorities of Canadians, of the priorities and interests of workers across North America, and we'll always look to work with our partners on creating more opportunities. There are concerns around the level of Chinese investment in Mexico that I think need to be addressed, but I am hopeful that we're going to be able to work constructively over the coming months and perhaps years to ensure that North America remains an advantageous place for North Americans, for our workers, for our middle class, and creates real growth.
Prochaine question.
Laurence Martin de Radio-Canada, juste là-dessus, est-ce que vous seriez prêt à signer un accord de libre-échange avec les États-Unis, mais sans le Mexique?
On a commencé avec un accord de libre-échange entre le Canada et les États-Unis dans les années 80 et on a pu l'élargir pour de très bonnes raisons avec le Mexique. Moi, mon idéal, ce serait de continuer avec un accord de libre-échange pour l'Amérique du Nord. Mais comme j'ai dit, il y a des défis au niveau de la présence de la Chine au Mexique qui vont devoir être adressés par le gouvernement mexicain, mais on est là pour travailler de façon constructive avec tous nos partenaires.
Donc la porte n'est pas fermée à exclure le Mexique.
Je préfère de loin avoir une entente nord-américaine, mais ma job, c'est de protéger les intérêts des Canadiens. Et comme on a su amener des éléments dans la renégociation de l'ALENA qui avantageaient les travailleurs mieux payés dans l'industrie automobile canadienne et américaine plutôt que les travailleurs automobiles mexicains, on va continuer de chercher des façons de défendre nos travailleurs. I think one of the things that we demonstrated in the renegotiation of NAFTA the first time around with the Trump administration was we did put in measures around high wages for certain elements of the automotive sector that were about protecting good jobs in the automotive sector in Canada and in the United States, and understood that it was something that would be more challenging for Mexico, but would also be an upward pressure on wages in Mexico for Mexican workers to be able to compete on a level playing field with the kinds of high-quality jobs that we have in Canada and the United States. Ideally, trade is about creating opportunities for more people to join the middle class in countries around the world. And that's certainly why we see one of the best things to do with trade is to see people lifted up in countries like Mexico and other emerging economies. At the same time, we know that standing up for Canadian jobs and Canadian opportunities is the fundamental job of any Canadian Prime Minister, and that's what we're going to continue to do. But I am hopeful that we're going to be able to do it within the context of trilateral negotiations and renew and strengthen NAFTA in ways that works for all three of our countries.
Next question.
Hola, Prime Minister. Judy
Hola,
Trin
Judy.
with CTV News. I'd like to ask a question in regards to your meetings with APEC leaders and their perceptions as to what to do with a Trump administration that does not support climate change initiatives, that does not support the advancement of women's rights. It is something that you have championed in your tenure as Prime Minister. Do you see those issues falling by the wayside as nations scramble to make trade deals with the U.S. and keep on the side of Trump?
First of all, APEC is a gathering of 21 economies with an economic focus. And we have demonstrated over the past years in Canada that we create that economic growth by signing good trade deals that demonstrate that the growth created by that trade will be more equitably shared with vulnerable populations, with indigenous populations, that will protect the environment, that will create opportunities for women. These are things that we've built into our economic approach in a way that has borne fruit. And, for example, in our most recent trade deal signed with Indonesia, that's a part of it as well. So for us, we see that standing up for values, standing up for women and marginalized peoples are integral to creating a strong economic narrative. Now, every country gets to set its own priorities, but as I've always done, I'll stand up for Canadian values and interests while protecting Canadian jobs and working constructively with other countries, even when there are points of disagreement.
If I may shift your attention to Afghanistan, former Canadian soldier David Lavery has been taken into custody by the Taliban. As you know, Prime Minister, he was instrumental in helping about 100 Afghan Canadians, as well as the families of Afghan interpreters who helped our Canadian forces in Afghanistan. I'd like to know what Canada is doing to ensure that he is safe. Do you have knowledge that he is safe? And what kind of contact have you made with Mr. Lavery?
I can, first of all, assure you that the Canadian government is taking very, very seriously this situation. We have already engaged with consular assistance for the family, but for operational and reasons of privacy, I think you'll understand that I can't get into further elements of what we're doing.
Next question.
Prime Minister Brian Platt with Bloomberg. Yesterday, German Chancellor Scholz spoke with Vladimir Putin by phone, and we know that Ukrainian President Zelensky is not very happy about it. Do you think this was a good idea for Scholz and Putin to speak, and do you think other G7 leaders, such as yourself, at some point may need to open a line of communication to the Russian president?
I think we all understand how important it is to see an end to the violence in Ukraine, to see an end to conflicts around the world, and that requires a level of engagement with counterparts who, in many cases, we disagree with. I know there's a lot of work to do to see the conflict in the illegal invasion of Ukraine ended. We're continuing to engage closely with Zelensky and with Ukrainians. I think it's a good thing that there are conversations around this, but the level of trust that I have for Vladimir Putin is probably at an all-time low right now.
Incoming leader you did speak with last week was Donald Trump. When you spoke with Mr. Trump, was he aware of what Canada's done on China in terms of Canada's tariffs? And do you believe this may buy Canada any credit when it comes to looking at the USMCA under President Trump?
We spoke directly about this issue. He inquired after Canada's engagements and positioning around China. I pointed out we have 100% tariff on Chinese electric vehicles and 25% tariffs on steel and aluminum, and that seemed to align very much with the way he's been thinking on it. But we're going to continue to approach things in a robust way and make sure we're protecting our interests as North American economies.
Next question.
Hello, Prime Minister. Karina Roman, CBC News. Here in South America, there is a trade increasing, building trade ties with China. Back home in Canada and North America, we're building walls with tariffs in terms of trade with China. Is there a divide growing in the world between those who do business with China and those who do not? And will Canada and nations have to take sides?
Well, first of all, Canada has a very strong trade relationship with China. We have a tremendous amount of agricultural exports. We import many goods from China. We're going to continue to engage with China in responsible and robust ways. Every country gets to make determinations around what are sensitive or pivotal sectors that it wants to support more in very deliberate ways. But Canadians benefit when we continue to trade with the world, and that's something that we're going to be doing, but we'll be doing it eyes wide open in the case of China and other countries.
And on another note, we have asked you lots of questions about Trump and what impact his impending presidency has on nations and the conversations here. Is there something you can tell us about the feeling perhaps of urgency or of minds more focused at this summit and in the next 2 months to sort of get things done and get things in place before he takes over?
I think there probably are elements of accelerating certain things in the coming months for some, but for the most part, people are being thoughtful about how to position themselves over the coming years in a way that's going to be constructive, beneficial for them, and create opportunities for all their trading partners, including with the United States. It's an approach that is perhaps a little less surprised or anxious than it was 8 years ago when Donald Trump was first elected. I think people know a little more about what to expect and are leaning on examples of countries like Canada that managed to navigate successfully through win-win renegotiations of our most important trade deal as examples of the kinds of constructive work that we can do to grow the economy and benefit citizens in our countries.
En français, please.
Je pense qu'il y a peut-être moins d'anxiété perplexe cette fois-ci qu'il y avait il y a 8 ans quand il a gagné pour la première fois. Les gens sont vraiment focusés sur le besoin de se positionner pour créer des opportunités avec l'économie américaine de façon à créer des ententes gagnant-gagnant. On sait que M. Trump a une approche particulière et les gens sont en train de regarder, entre autres, le Canada parce qu'on a su naviguer une situation difficile et complexe de façon à livrer pour nos citoyens et pour les Américains en même temps.
Glenn McGregor, City News. You referred in your opening remarks to exports of Canadian nuclear reactors. You were asked yesterday at the CEO event about how you felt about building more nuclear reactors for domestic use in Canada. Your response wasn't really clear to me. Could you maybe elaborate about how you feel about provincial governments increasing the number of nuclear facilities?
I think we are going to need significantly more baseload power in Canada if we're going to continue to draw in the kind of global investment we've been able to draw in around the world. Canada has increased its foreign direct investment by 60% since 2015. Last year, we were the 3rd destination country in the world for foreign direct investment, which means we were #1 per capita in the G20. The world is interested in coming to Canada because we have some of the best workers in the world, we have the natural resources, we have trade deals with the world, and we have an 80% clean energy grid already. That is an extremely attractive proposition that countries and companies around the world want to be part of. But as we're drawing in these significant investments, whether it's Honda or Volkswagen or mining interests like Rio Tinto or others that are building up so much of our capacity to deliver to partners what the world needs from reliable, trustworthy sources, we're going to need more power. And we need that power to be as low emission as possible. Yes, we're phasing out our coal-fired power plants. We're looking for CCUS around our natural gas to abate the production. We're developing hydrogen solutions. We're investing in wind and solar and all sorts of different solutions. But we're going to need nuclear to be part of the mix. And I'm busy pitching nuclear energy around the world, have been for a number of years, which resulted in deals with Romania, not with just 2 new CANDU reactors, but refurbishing a number of existing reactors to extend their life. There is a real opportunity for Canada with both a vibrant nuclear industry that's innovating around small and modular reactors in a number of provinces, that's got a reliable source of uranium in Saskatchewan, that the world is looking to replace the Russian supply chains that are now uncertain for many. And people know that even though nuclear does come with real challenges, significant expense, long lead time to build them, if we want to keep drawing in investments and create opportunities for Canadian jobs, nuclear is going to have to be part of the mix. And I'm excited about that. I'm excited about the opportunities, and we're going to continue working with provinces. But it's not the federal government that decides where and when one builds power generation. But I can tell you I've had many conversations with a number of provinces about nuclear being a solution, particularly in places where there is no hydroelectricity or hydroelectricity capacity is pretty close to maxed out.
Looking ahead to Rio and the uncertainty about future U.S. support for Ukraine, what are you looking for from other G20 countries about filling that gap if Trump pulls funding partially or fully? And what kind of commitments, new commitments, is Canada prepared to make in Rio?
Well, first of all, our priority is to try and see a ceasefire, to try and see an end to this illegal invasion by Russia as quickly as possible. And there are perhaps windows in which that might be able to happen in the coming months. We're always hopeful that we will be able to get to a peace in that situation that will demonstrate that we are standing up for the international rules-based order and the UN Charter. But let's also be very blunt. All the allies in the world would not be able to replace a complete withdrawal from supporting Ukraine by the United States. And that's why the conversations about why it's so important to stand up to Russian bullies, why it's so important to be there to defend the international rules-based order are continuing across allies, including with the United States.
Evan Dyer, CBC News. Prime Minister, you just talked about the goal in Ukraine being a ceasefire. In the past, you've talked
Sorry,
about...
not a ceasefire, an end to the conflict and a peace.
Okay. In the past, you've used the word victory. And I just want to ask you if, under the new circumstances, if the goal is still victory at all costs over Russia and Ukraine, or if it has moved a bit.
The fundamental challenge we face is that Russia violated some pretty basic principles of the international rules-based order. They violated the UN Charter. They are trying to demonstrate that if you have a big enough army, you can redraw lines on the map that have been established for 70 plus years since the UN came into being. Any victory on that issue by Russia, any demonstration that if you have a bigger army, you get to redraw lines on a map, would have devastating consequences, not just for Ukraine, but obviously for Ukraine and Ukrainians, but for the entire world. How many countries have a neighbor that has a historical claim over this corner across the river where their citizens used to live, or that got rejigged 100 years ago? How many conflicts have been averted because the world has agreed that you may not like the borders where they are, but they are where they are, and they hold, and the world is willing to enforce those lines on a map? The fact that Russia has chosen to redraw those lines on the map is the thing that worries people the most around the world. And that's why it is so important that Ukraine wins this conflict, that Russia loses this conflict, that no one will look at Putin and said, well, it was a hassle, but he did get those territories that proved that might can sometimes make right. This is the stability of the global economy. It's the well-being of billions of people at play. And that's the principle for which we are collectively standing up when we are unequivocal that we will be with Ukraine with whatever it takes until they win.
Secondly, also, of course, U.S. nominations are a domestic matter, but they do have implications for Canada. So I want to ask you about one in particular. Tulsi Gabbard, as Director of National Intelligence. This is a person who has a long history of defending Vladimir Putin, of justifying the invasion of Ukraine. Also lots of questions about her personal relationships, travel, financial relationships. Is Canada going to be able to continue to have the intelligence relationship that it has with the United States now, both the bilateral and the Five Eyes relationship, continue to be a consumer of U.S. intelligence? and trust what's coming in?
Well, I think these questions you're pointing out are questions that are being asked by an awful lot of people in the United States right now. And they have processes whereby they confirm people, they move forward, they support, they make choices. And I am sure that the American system will continue to demand the right kinds of answers and how they move forward, particularly when it comes to issues of national security. When it comes to keeping Canadians safe, when it comes to keeping Americans safe, our countries can't flinch on that. We have to take these things seriously. And I know Americans take it very seriously, but sometimes political parties do strange things. What comes to mind is the fact that the leader of the official opposition in Canada refuses to get top-secret briefings that will allow him to keep his own party and his own members safe. Sometimes political parties make strange choices, and it's the job of citizens to be asking those questions as to why.
Dylan Robertson, the Canadian Press. Question for the three of you at the podium. I was wondering about countries turning to Canada for advice on how to navigate a second Trump presidency. Who's asking us?
I think they're generalized conversations. People know that Canada has had a certain amount of experience dealing with various American administrations, and specifically our government navigated in a win-win way through the first Trump presidency. People are sharing notes, asking for advice, and we're happy to talk about our approach that is grounded in demonstrating that middle classes in both of our countries can do well when we work together.
You won't specify the region or if these are G7 or other partners, I take it. And my other question is about, you mentioned there being less anxiety because we've navigated Trump before, and I wanted to sort of get your thinking here. There's a pervasive feeling in the US that Trump will be more able to execute his agenda. He sort of ruled out the people that would prevent him from moving forward on these things. There's sort of more anxiety among that thinking in the US, and I'm just wondering, how do you square that with being less anxious as a government?
Well, I think there is a sense, and I don't want to get too much into analysis or opinion here, but there is a sense that that this is something, this is an administration that has an approach that is less unknown than it was back in 2016. There are potentially some very challenging consequences of some of the decisions that may be made, but I think a lot of countries are focused on building up resilience and capacity to respond to those challenges, as opposed to wondering whether or not those challenges are going to materialize. I think people know those challenges are going to materialize, that Donald Trump is someone who tends to do what he says he's going to do, and that means people are going to be able to think about how to position themselves best given some of those things that are coming, and that wasn't necessarily the sense back in 2016.
Thank you. This is what concludes today's press conference. Merci
Merci
beaucoup.
tout le monde.